Love x Revenge is a channel where emotions collide, secrets surface, and a single moment can change the course of many lives. This story is about loneliness in a crowded room, about a whispered request that seemed harmless, and about how pretending can sometimes reveal the deepest truths. She sat alone at the far edge of the banquet hall, fingers wrapped tightly around a glass she hadn't touched. The wedding of her younger sister was supposed to be joyful, loud, full of laughter and shared memories. Instead, it felt like a spotlight had been fixed on her empty chair. Every table was filled with couples leaning close to each other, families posing for photos, children weaving between guests. And then there was her. Alone. Again. Maya had chosen a simple dress, elegant but understated, hoping it would help her blend into the background. It didn't. Relatives she barely recognized kept stopping by with polite smiles that barely hid their curiosity. "So, when is it your turn?" they asked, or worse, "Are you seeing anyone now?" Each question landed like a small stone in her chest. She answered with practiced grace, smiling, deflecting, excusing herself. Eventually, she stopped trying and just sat there, watching her sister glow at the center of the room. She told herself she was happy for her. And she was, truly. But happiness had a way of making her loneliness sharper, more defined. She hadn't imagined being 32 and attending her sister's wedding alone, not after everything she'd sacrificed for her family. Not after the engagement that had fallen apart 2 years ago, leaving behind whispers and half-truths that still followed her like a shadow. That was when she noticed him. He stood near the drinks table, slightly apart from the others, holding a small boy on his hip. The child's tiny hand gripped the man's collar, his head resting trustingly against a strong shoulder. The man looked tired in a quiet way, like someone who had learned to keep going without complaint. His suit was well fitted but worn, as if it had seen more serious occasions than celebrations. He scanned the room with guarded eyes, clearly uncomfortable, yet protective, as if the world were something he had to shield his son from. Maya looked away quickly, embarrassed by her own curiosity. She didn't want to analyze strangers tonight. She just wanted the evening to be over. But fate had other plans. A few minutes later, the chair beside her shifted. She glanced up, surprised, and found the man standing there, his son now playing with a toy car on the floor at his feet. Up close, she noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the kind that came from years of responsibility rather than age. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice low so only she could hear. "This might sound strange, but could you pretend you're with me?" Maya blinked. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Just for a little while. People keep asking questions. About my wife. About why I'm alone with a child at a wedding. I don't have the energy to explain everything tonight." She looked at the boy, who smiled up at her without a trace of fear. Something softened inside her. "And you think pretending I'm with you will help?" He nodded, almost sheepishly. "I promise I won't make it awkward. You can say no." She should have said no. Every sensible part of her mind told her to refuse and return to her lonely but uncomplicated corner. But another part, the part that was tired of being pitied and questioned, whispered that this could be a relief. "Just for one evening." "All right," she said after a pause. "But only if you promise the same. No awkwardness." A small smile touched his lips, genuine and grateful. "Deal." "I'm Daniel." "Maya," she replied. He sat beside her, close enough to look convincing but respectful of her space. Almost immediately, the atmosphere around her changed. Curious glances turned into approving nods. Whispers shifted in tone. Someone leaned over and said, "Oh, I didn't realize you came together," and Maya smiled, feeling a strange warmth spread through her chest. Daniel played his part perfectly. He offered her his arm when they stood, leaned in to speak softly, asked if she needed anything. It felt natural in a way that surprised her. When his son, Leo, climbed onto her lap without warning, she laughed instead of stiffening. She hadn't laughed like that in a long time. As the evening unfolded, their pretending became something else entirely. They talked, really talked, in the spaces between songs and speeches. Daniel told her he was a single father, his wife having passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness. He spoke of it calmly, but Maya could hear the ache beneath his words. She shared her own story, the broken engagement, the way people assumed she had failed somehow. No one talks about how exhausting it is to explain your life to others, Daniel said softly. Maya nodded. Or how sometimes you just want to be normal, even if it's only for a night. When the slow music began, Daniel hesitated, then extended his hand. Should we keep pretending? She took his hand. Yes. They moved together on the dance floor, awkward at first, then more in sync. Maya was aware of his warmth, the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her palm. For the first time that evening, she forgot about the empty chair she had been sitting on before. She forgot about the questions and the stares. She felt seen, not as someone to be pitied, but as someone chosen. Later, when the wedding began to wind down and guests started to leave, Daniel walked her to the entrance. The night air was cool, carrying the distant sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Well, he said, rubbing the back of his neck, thank you. You saved me tonight. She smiled. You saved me too. There was a pause, heavy with things unsaid. This was the moment where the pretending was supposed to end. Where they would exchange polite goodbyes and return to their separate lives. I don't want to pretend anymore, Daniel said suddenly. At least, not about wanting to see you again. Maya's heart skipped. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for regret. She found none. Me neither, she admitted. What began as a whispered request turned into late-night conversations, shared breakfasts, and cautious steps forward. It wasn't easy. There were fears, especially when it came to Leo, and moments when old wounds resurfaced. But there was honesty too, and patience, and a kind of love that grew quietly, rooted in understanding rather than illusion. Months later, at another family gathering, Maya sat beside Daniel, Leo asleep against her shoulder. Someone asked how they met, and she laughed softly. It started with pretending, she said. But the truth was waiting the whole time. In the end, it wasn't the wedding that changed her life. It was the courage to say yes to a stranger, to allow herself to be seen, and to discover that sometimes, the most real love begins as a simple act of kindness.